In a crowded marketplace in Manila, where the sun blazed down on rusted tin roofs and the smell of roasted corn mixed with the salty sea breeze, a young boy named Miguel often stood barefoot on the corner, holding a battered old guitar that was missing one string, his shirt faded and patched by his mother's tired hands, his voice carrying through the noise of jeepneys, vendors, and hurried footsteps like a fragile prayer refusing to be drowned out. And though most people passed him by without more than a glance, a few would pause, drawn to the way his voice trembled with sincerity, because Miguel did not just sing, he poured his life into every note, every lyric, as if the music was the only way his soul could escape the cage of poverty that trapped his family. And deep down, even though he was only 13, he knew that singing was more than a way to earn coins for food. It was his way of telling the world, I exist, I matter, I dream. His father, once a fisherman, had been lost to the sea during a storm, and his mother washed clothes for neighbors to feed Miguel and his younger sister Rosa, who was frail and often sick. And though Miguel carried the burden of watching her suffer when there wasn't enough money for medicine, he never let despair extinguish the fire in his heart, because music had been his father's gift to him. The old guitar had belonged to his father, who taught him simple chords on quiet nights before the sea claimed him, and now Miguel carried that memory like a lantern in the darkness. One day, as Miguel played on the street, a tourist from America stopped and listened intently, recording him on a phone and later posting the video online with the caption, "The voice that touched my soul." And Miguel thought nothing of it at first, but within weeks, the video had spread across the internet, reaching millions of viewers, and soon a message arrived from a television network inviting him to audition for an international talent show in Manila, a chance that seemed like a fantasy, almost impossible for a boy who could barely afford bus fare. But neighbors gathered together, pooling small amounts of money, some giving spare coins, others bringing food for the journey, and one man offering his own worn shoes so Miguel wouldn't have to walk into the audition hall barefoot. And though Miguel was overwhelmed by their kindness, he promised them all he would sing not just for himself but for every child who had ever felt invisible. On the day of the audition, the city was overwhelming, the shining glass buildings, the polished floors of the theater, the cameras, the bright lights, the judges sitting with expectant faces, but Miguel clutched his guitar tightly, whispering a prayer for courage, and when the music began, he chose a song his father had once loved, Hotel California, a classic that most thought too ambitious for a poor boy with no training. But as Miguel sang, the first note silenced the crowd, because his voice was raw yet haunting, filled with both pain and hope, the kind of sound that goes beyond technique and strikes directly at the human heart. And as the verses unfolded, his eyes closed, his small hands trembling on the strings, the audience felt as though they were being pulled into Miguel's story, not just the song, but the ache of nights spent hungry, the longing of a child for his father, the unbroken resilience of someone who refused to give up. One judge, a stern man known for harsh critiques, leaned forward, his eyes glistening, as though remembering his own childhood struggles, while another judge, a woman who had lost her brother years ago, wept openly, whispering, "This is why we do this show." And by the final chorus, the entire hall was standing, clapping, some crying, others holding their breath, unwilling to let the moment end. And when Miguel finished, silence hung in the air before it was broken by thunderous applause, the kind of ovation that lifts a soul and reminds the world of its shared humanity. The judges rose to their feet, tears streaming, and the host rushed forward to hug the boy, saying, "You've just given us something we'll never forget." But Miguel, still trembling, bowed his head and whispered into the microphone, "I sang this for my father, for my mother, and for my sister, because they taught me love is stronger than anything." At that moment, the cameras caught Rosa in the audience, her frail frame clapping with all her strength, her smile shining like the sun, and the judges themselves stepped off the stage to embrace Miguel, one of them removing a golden pin from their jacket and pressing it into his hand as a symbol of advancement straight to the finals, bypassing the usual rounds, and the crowd erupted in joy, chanting his name. Yet the true climax came not in his victory but in what happened afterward, when sponsors and strangers from around the world began sending donations, letters, and gifts, enough to pay for Rose's treatment, enough to move the family into a small but safe home. And though fame and opportunities flooded Miguel's life, he never forgot the dusty street corner where it all began, often returning to play his guitar for the children there, handing out food, encouraging them to chase their dreams, telling them that no matter how poor, no matter how broken the road seemed, music, or whatever passion burned inside them, could carry them beyond the limits of circumstance. Years later, when Miguel stood on a grand stage in America, his voice now trained but still carrying the same raw emotion, he told his story to millions watching at home, reminding them that talent knows no borders, that kindness can come from the smallest acts, a neighbor giving coins, a stranger uploading a video, and that hope, once shared, multiplies until it transforms lives. And when he sang, Hotel California, again, this time with a full band, the judges who once wept for him were joined by a global audience, many of them crying too, because it wasn't just a song anymore, it was the living testimony of a boy who turned poverty into purpose, loss into legacy, and dreams into destiny. And so the story of Miguel, the poor Filipino boy with a broken guitar, became more than an audition, more than a viral moment, it became a beacon of what humanity can be when compassion meets courage, leaving the world with one undeniable truth, that no matter where you come from, no matter what you face, your voice, your dream, your song can change everything, and sometimes, just sometimes, it can make the whole world cry, and then believe again.